Jonathan Reynolds, MP, with us for the government this morning. Looking forward to Donald Trump coming into office?
Well, I think it's going to be a challenging time for anyone who is responsible for trade in a big economy because of some of those pledges that were made in the campaign. But look, I think there's opportunities for the UK in this. There are lots of things I, as the Business and Trade Secretary, would like to see the UK doing more closely with the US in areas like technology, digital trade, in services. So if there's an offer from the US to talk about how we could collaborate closer together on that, of course we take that up.
Are you worried about a tariff war?
I am, because the UK is a very globally orientated economy, so the exposure, the danger to the UK is actually greater than even some comparable countries around that. So a lot of our work has been preparing for that, engaging early with the new administration. If you look at their take on tariffs and why they've put that forward, it's a huge concern in the US in this new administration for the trade deficits they've got with China in the EU. Now, that doesn't apply to us, so we're in a different position to some of the European countries or other partners and allies of the US, but we can't be complacent, and we're very well prepared for that engagement.
What might it mean for our car industry?
Well, for the UK car industry, which is a jewel in the crown of our economy, it's a very export-orientated economy, and we've got firms that sell a lot to the US, a lot to China, a lot into the EU. So when you're responsible for that, you've got to be really careful about making sure your relationship with one country doesn't damage our relationship with another. And that's why I want to see the UK at the absolute heart of being able to trade with the US, with the EU, with China, with India, with the Gulf, as well as and other parts of the world. But you're right to say that's an area where you've got to be very careful to make sure we're giving ourselves the platform we need to succeed in each of those markets.
Because it could cost jobs, couldn't it?
Ultimately, tariffs are paid for by your own people. So it's got real pressures in terms of inflation, in terms of your ability to employ people, to export to other markets. Free trade's a good thing. Reducing tariffs, whichever partner that is important. So look, we're well prepared for this. We've got a good argument to make, and I think there's a chance, actually, if we play this right, to get even better relationship out of some of these things that have been put forward. But we can't be complacent, and there are risks, yes, of a tariff war between friends, allies, and other parts of the world.
Tell us about the investment in the new Sunderland manufacturing site.
Yeah, great investment today. The powertrains, that's sort of the engine part for an electric vehicle. New £50 million investment partnership with Nissan in Sunderland today. Comes on the back of another piece of great news yesterday. Big Malaysian investment in the Bristol area, £4 billion. So look, there's a lot to do to turn around what has been a decade and a half of disappointing economic performance in the UK. But we're seeing a real endorsement of the government's plan for change, of our ambitions around growth from these kinds of investments. And of course, I want to see particularly the automotive sector go from strength to strength.
And is this electric vehicle linked?
Yes, and this is what the
that's
powertrain.
The problem, isn't it?
Well, it's not a problem because the world has regulations in place, all these key export markets, to make this transition. But what we've got to do, what I've done already
quick enough,
as the Business Secretary, you're right. And there's concerns sometimes. I think people underappreciate how good these products are. We've seen actually quite a lot of adaptation of people taking up electric vehicles in the UK, but we've got to push further.
Figures are down, aren't they?
Well, they're not where I would like them to be. Most of the firms have met the targets under the policy for this year. But you're right to say I've had to show a little bit of pragmatism from the government to open a consultation on changing how those regulations work as companies make this transition to electric vehicles, to make sure we're not penalising people who produce vehicles in the UK. I feel that is what I inherited from the previous government. So myself, the Transport Secretary, the Net Zero Secretary, we're all united in saying, yes, we want to make this transition, but we want jobs and things produced in the UK as part of that.
But is it not right to say that car industry in the UK, many of them are having to buy credits from Chinese and American companies in order to try to meet their electric vehicle targets?
It is, and that's why we've opened the consultation, because I don't want that to happen. I want this transition to work, but I don't want it to work in a way that penalises people making vehicles in the UK and instead sees that flow of money, investment money, into countries like China. They've adapted
America.
Very well. Well, yeah, in the main, I mean, the problem that we have seen is demand has fallen across all of Europe. So yes, America and China have been the beneficiaries of those policies. So we're committed to that transition, ambitious for it, but I don't like the system we inherited from the previous government. I think you could even say it's penalising people who produce in the UK.
Yeah, as is the net zero targets by this government. So you're going to have to look at those again.
No, because the automotive sector is an export-led sector in the UK. We sell abroad 80% of what we make. And all of those countries are committed to a transition to electric vehicles. So if we didn't change our production, we're going to have nothing to sell into these countries. So the destination's not in question, but how that policy works, how we work with the private sector to get there, That is the crucial thing here. And I think the mixture of this government's got, which is ambition, but pragmatism in terms of how you get there, that's the right mix.
Are you not worried about the viability of Nissan? I'm reading that they're in a lot of trouble unless they merge with Honda.
I'm not complacent about anything, because what you have seen is a huge growth, particularly in China, of electric vehicle production, and that's really changed the business models, the economics for a lot of European producers. But, you know, I grew up in Sunderland myself. I know that factory particularly well. An absolutely world-class facility, brilliant workforce, leading production standards. So there's a bright future there, as long as you've got a government which is supportive, which they do. And actually, on the potential collaboration with Honda, look, my ambition would be, why can't that work for us? Why can't potentially we get to a situation one day where some Honda vehicles are being made at that facility, that brilliant factory in Sunderland? So I see opportunity everywhere. I'm an optimistic person. And look, I'm not complacent about any of this, because the challenge for the European automotive sector is very, very strong. But if you've got the right government policies, the right relationships to those companies, there's a good future ahead.
Are you putting any money in it, the government?
Yes, most of the automotive investments we see in the UK and in most European countries and around the world involve a collaboration between the government and the private sector. This one is the same, so we work very closely with that. We don't subsidise companies, but we work together on things like R&D, on new investments, on how we get the land ready for that, and that's part of this programme.
The reason I'm asking that, of course, Secretary of State, is because Nissan, according to CNBC, the only chance of survival that they have is to merge with Honda. If they don't do that, if they stay out on their own, it looks as though they are likely to fail. They only have 12 or 14 months to survive. So why would you risk government money at this stage?
Because we are absolutely committed to a UK automotive sector. We're absolutely committed to that incredible impact Nissan's had in Sunderland and the northeast of England and for the country
even if it may go under.
As a whole. Look, I recognise Nissan as a company are facing some challenges across the world, but I think to give up on them, to say it's a completely negative picture, would be a huge mistake. And there's a great future for that factory back in Sunderland. And if you've got a government willing to work with Nissan to do that, that's where the future lies.
What do you think of today's GDP figures? Not as good as expected.
Well, the economy growing is always
0.1%. It couldn't grow any less.
The economy is growing, inflation down yesterday, government borrowing costs coming down yesterday. Look, all of that's good. It's an endorsement of the plan for change, but I'm not satisfied. I want more. I think people underestimate how committed this government is to making, at times would have been, two difficult decisions in British politics to get growth where it needs to be. And that is what this government's committed to. We've got the regulators coming in today as part of that conversation. Our agenda on skills, industrial strategy, trade, planning, it's all about this. So, of course, the economy growing is good news. Of course, inflation coming down is good news. But we're very, very ambitious and determined for the future. Darren
Jones sat where you were yesterday, and he was not as critical as the Prime Minister was about Jerry Adams potentially receiving compensation because of a change in the law that this government wants to implement. What's your view?
I don't think anyone wants to see someone like Jerry Adams receive compensation, and that's what the Prime Minister made clear yesterday. We've had to change what we inherited. I mean, the Legacy Act was unlawful. You know, there was a legal challenge to it. So we've got to put something new in place. The compensation people receive comes from something called, I believe, remedial orders. And look, there was real suffering from people, ordinary people on both sides of the divide in the Troubles. I believe that's what that is about, rather than people like...
But you can put something in place to make sure that somebody like Jerry Adams doesn't receive any money.
Yeah, that's what the Prime Minister was committed to yesterday, and I think he's right to say that.
OK. What's going on with Tulip Siddiq? Let me just ask you about her before I let you go. It looks as though there is yet another case, another inquiry that's been launched in Bangladesh investigating money laundering and power misuse, and she seems to be named in that again. What's going on?
Well, I mean, Tulip is related to the former Prime Minister of Bangladesh. There's been significant changes. Look, I can't comment on what they are or aren't doing. I think Tulip's statement yesterday when she left the front bench spoke for itself. She was not found to have breached the ministerial code or any wrongdoing.
No, but she had her wrist slapped.
Well, she took the decision to step down. I thought the Prime Minister's response was right, was generous, was recognised the brilliant job that she had done. So there's a lot going on in Bangladesh that, through family, you know...
No, but she's named.
Well, look, I can't comment on what or isn't happening with the new interim government in Bangladesh, but from Tulip's point of view, I think she's acted in the right way with integrity.
Again, Darren Jones sat there saying that she was good at her job. Do you think she was?
Yes, I do. Myself was once the shadow city minister for the Labour Party. I know that brief very well, and I know that Tulip was very well regarded in the city.
Just before I let you go, tell me what's going on in Ukraine.
Well, the Prime Minister is visiting Ukraine today. Our support for Ukraine has been steadfast. I myself, through being the business secretary, have done a lot in the first 6 months of this government in terms of our export support for Ukrainian companies, for defence exports to defend Ukraine. We obviously want to see Russia's illegal invasion come to an end, and the Prime Minister's support for Ukraine is visible by being there today.
How much is it going to cost?
Well, we have put significant resource into defending Ukraine, as have other European countries and the US. National security has no price tag. I mean, the fact that Russia has behaved...
So a lot.
I don't think you can say that it's not the right thing to do, it's not the right investment when you have Russian forces breaching national borders, behaving in that way. Ukraine is about our security as well as the security of Ukrainians, and it's important the UK remains committed to that.
So you're not going to tell me?
Look, I think the figure in the Prime Minister's press release today is around £3 billion a year of support to Ukraine. There are other ways we support Ukraine. UK Export Finance plays a role in that. But staying steadfast in defence of Ukraine is absolutely right.
OK, for now, thanks.
Thank you.
It's good to see you as always.